Hi, this is Chris from the Project Management Guide. This video is about the project financial management and how to create a budget for beginners. In this video, we're going to look at how to create a project budget. We're going to look at some of the typical costs that you would put into your budget. We're also going to have a look at why you need to add operational costs into your costings as well. And then in a moment, I'm going to take a simple project budget and I'm going to show you how it's broken. In order to understand the costs, we might need to do some fairly detailed feasibility studies or discovery phases on our project. And what we're trying to do here is understand the costs in a bit more detail. We're trying to understand the complexity of what we're building. We're also trying to understand what the risk areas as well. And we're also trying to get to understand what contingency we need to put into our project. Now we might typically put somewhere in the region of 10 to 25% contingency budget that we'll use later on, just in case for unforeseen circumstances or things that come up in the project that we hadn't forecast or planned. So as part of the discovery phase or feasibility, we might need to build a proof of concept, or we might need to build a prototype of something that we're trying to build, like a system or a piece of software or something like that. So typically you have to pay for this sort of activity to sort of build out a sort of model, if you like, or try and understand the complexity of a system we're going to build, or if it's a physical system that we're building, then we need to understand it in a bit more detail. If we're buying a product or a service or say a big system off somebody, we might need to go through a process of quotations or some sort of procurement process where we compare the pricing and the services offered by a number of suppliers, and typically that might take several months to organise, and it's actually quite a labour-intensive piece of work to get the costings all together and all of that sort of thing. So it's quite a big piece of work to run a procurement process as well. But it helps us bottom out what our costs are on our project. So some of the typical costs we might have in a project, I've outlined them here. So if we've got a development project, a software project, for example, when we've got a whole load of development project costs, we might have, as I said before, we might have supplier quotations. We might have software licenses or licenses for hardware or some equipment purchases or some other product costs. Quite often a big part of costings in a project is freelancers or resources, or sometimes on a project we might be charged for internal costs for staff as well. So we need to, if we're going to have these costs, then we need to build a resource plan and understand what those costs are in detail and map those out over the duration of the project over several months, or however long our project might even be a year, 18 months in some projects. We also look at legal costs. If we're doing a procurement process or something, we might have legal costs. And also we might have some travel and expenses that we need to account for on our project as well. So here I've got a really simple budget that I've put together, and I'll just sort of run through it. So we can see that we've got a supplier called Web Dev Co Limited, and we've got them. They're building a website for us, and all we've done here is we've split the project into phases. And we've got a costing against each of the phases. So what this means is that when we come to manage the budget, that we can see how we're going against each of the different project phases as we go along in the project. And then in the next sort of section, I've broken out. We need a tester for the project, and I've put that in for 6 months. That's a freelancer, and we think that's going to cost £60,000. And I've also got a project manager for 9 months, but I'm only using them for 50% of the times, and they're coming from our internal IT team. And in this case, the IT team are charging us for the project manager. That's not always the case. Sometimes, if you get internal people, they're not always charged to your project, but that depends on your finance team on how they want to run the project. In the next section, I've broken out a whole set of additional costs. So we've got equipment for the project team. I've put that in as a nominal sort of £10,000. I've got some hosting set up. So this is for the hosting of the system that we're building of £20,000, and I've put travel and expenses in at £5,000. And overall, I've added a contingency here of about 15% to the overall project. So you can see how I've broken down the overall complexity of the project, and I've broken it down into quite a simple budget. And then from there we can build a management budget or a working budget for when we're running the project, when we've got approval to move forward with the project. Okay, so that's a very brief introduction on how to create a budget. And obviously, as a project manager, you're trying to keep your budget under control, and you're aiming to bring your budget in under the agreed budget. So that's what you're trying to do. And in order to do that, of course, you've got to have a pretty robust financial control process for managing your budget as you go along. So I've got another video which follows this one on how to manage your project budget once it's actually been agreed by your project board or your sponsor or your customer. I think it's quite important to mention that when we're costing out our project, we also should look at the operational costs of our project, or whatever is being delivered, the service that's being delivered, if it's a system or if it's a change, or some sort of new element is being delivered as part of our project. And quite often that means there's some operational costs involved once the service has gone live, and we need to understand what those are before we start the project, because they have a really important impact on the project. Because if those are really large, or become really large, if we haven't nailed those down before we even start the project, then that could impact the viability of our project in the first place, so the return on the investment. And typically what we're looking at is the running costs for the first 3 to 5 years of the new service. And so the sort of things that includes are, it might be the renewal of software licenses, it could be the maintenance figures for hardware or some equipment maintenance, or it could be hosting services for some systems or something like that. Or you might even have an increase in staffing and freelancers required to run the service. So it's really important that we understand what those costs are. And although we don't necessarily track those as part of the project management costs, what we do have to do is get those operational costs signed off as part of the green light, the agreement process for when we get the green light to start our project. So that's why it's important to understand what the operational costs are as part of the project management, the budget building process in the project initiation phase. And I've just done a really simple breakdown here of some typical operational costs to sort of give you some idea of what those sort of costs might look like operationally. So in the past I've certainly put these sort of costs into project initiation documents or project proposals, that sort of thing as well, so that it's all in one place, so that when we come to sign the project budget off with the rest of the PID or the project proposal or the terms of reference, whatever your name for that document is, the project plan document, it's all in one place so that everybody's clear on what the ongoing running costs are for the service once it's live. The project budget's going to take quite a bit of time to put together. Clearly, you're going to put all that together in a spreadsheet. Then you've got to present all of the costs to the sponsor and the customer. You've got to include any contingency in there. As I said, you'll put all your operational costs in there as well. And basically it's probably a meeting, or maybe even 1 or 2 meetings, where you're explaining the rationale for the budget. You're explaining what the key risk areas are, and then you need to get complete approval for all of your costing elements. And then once you've got all of that approved, then you've got approval to start. It's one of the key drivers to get approval to start the project. Thanks very much for watching the video. Please subscribe on the button below. I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear about how you're getting on with creating your project budgets, or if you've got any challenges or problems that you want, then leave me some questions below. You can find us at theprojectmanagementguide.com, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.